Welcome. I am Beth Radale. Welcome to the Shoreline League of Women Voters Luncheon. After lunch, we'll hear from our guest speakers on empowering our children's future through education in civics, climate change, and experiential learning. We have a short film from Rajam, Globe from Home's founder and CEO, and we'll hear from attorney Michael Rebell, professor and founder of the Center for Equity in Education, climate leader Harriet Shugarman, and the New York League of Women Voters former legislative director Barbara Bartoletti. Our annual luncheon is a collaborative effort, and thanks go to the Larchmont Mamaroneck League's co-presidents Peggy Jackson and Alice Pernick, Lauren Lambert, Judy Silberstein, Phyllis Caskel, Louise Perez, Marlene Colbert, and Cindy Dirks. The Rybrook Portchester League, and Maria Valente of Chocolations in Mamaroneck for the little gift that says LMV on your napkins for dessert chocolates. Thanks to all at Orienta Beach Club for this beautiful setting in our lunch. And thanks as well to LMC Media for filming today's event. We welcome our State League Education Issue Specialist, Marion Bott. And unfortunately, today our state representatives can't be with us. They are in the middle of negotiations on a budget in Albany, and they send their regrets and best wishes. To our elected officials who are with us today, you can stand if you wish or continue to eat lunch. We have with us Larchmont Mayor Sarah Bauer, Town of Rye Supervisor Gary Zuckerman, Town Administrator from Rye, Debbie Reisner, Village of Larchmont Trustee Dana Post, Village of Larchmont Trustee Bridget Brennan, Village of Larchmont Trustee Terrence Paré, Mamaroneck Town Clerk Allison May, Village of Mamaroneck Trustee Nora Lucas, Mamaroneck Village Judge Christy Derrico, Village of Portchester Trustee Joseph Carbon, Village of Rybrook Trustee David Heiser. Did I forget anybody? Thank you. Thank you to all who participate in today's raffle. We will announce the winner after lunch. Suppose you or a child under your care experienced hunger pangs. Suppose the only option was the canned food standing next to the centerpiece on your table. What would you do? Would you use a can opener like the one I have here? Today's luncheon is about can openers and experiential learning, the teach a person to fish metaphor, rather than gifting the person a pound of lox from Zabar's, for example. We'll explore tools that our children can use to preserve democracy and mitigate the effects of climate emergency. We also have can-do tools for you. Please take home and use the Love Your Food messages. They're on the table here. I left the one on your table. Mother Nature could use a good swap meet. It's a beauty. The League of Women Voters qualifies as a can opener because the suffragists who formed the League in 1919 did so knowing that democracy requires participation by educated voters. And the need for the know-how is as true today as it was a century ago. And that inspired today's programs. A recurring refrain these days is preserving democracy and our freedoms. The New York State Equal Rights Amendment to the New York State Constitution will be on the flip side, the backside of the November ballot. The proposed amendment would recognize that every person is entitled to equal rights and justice under the law. Currently, New York has legislation that protects against certain classes of discrimination, but it is not comprehensive and it is not ironclad. Enshrining the Equal Rights Amendment in the state constitution would protect against discrimination involving religion, race, ethnicity, national origin, age, disability, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy outcomes, and provide explicit safeguards for reproductive autonomy and access to reproductive health care. We have information about the ERA on the side table. Please sign up on the list to stay informed and help spread the word about the ERA. And think of instances where you were treated unfairly for no justifiable reason and had no reasonable recourse. Taking steps to spread the word about the ERA would benefit our loved ones and others with added protection. Terry Toll is here today. Terry, please wave your hand. Terry's here to answer your questions, and when we break for lunch or later, consider sharing as part of your lunch conversation examples of how you or someone you know experienced discrimination on account of age, gender, parenting choices, or otherwise. Share your stories with Terry. Specific stories of discrimination will engage the public in our campaign for a yes vote on the amendment. Another can opener is the New York League's Student Inside Albany program. And this year, the Rybrook Portchester League has selected Hayden Cohen and Joshua Montfiliski, and the Larchmont Mamaroneck League has selected Sierra Doug and Anna Donahue to attend the half-week, all-expenses-paid Students Inside Albany program, where they will meet other students from across the state, learn about and observe state government in action, and spend time with our elected state officials. Education today aims to develop our children into global citizens, since so much of our daily lives interconnect with people and conditions across our planet. In the global warming context, adverse impacts experienced by other countries may result from action and inaction originating in America. Likewise, preserving our freedoms and democracy requires children who are knowledgeable about the rule of law here, separation of powers, and the importance of civic engagement. Global citizenship and American citizenship are not mutually exclusive. The success of each benefits the success of the other in this age of climate emergency, transnational predatory disinformation, misinformation, voter suppression, and targeted erosion of personal rights. In the academic sphere, standardized testing has been replacing such courses as social studies and civics at the moment when interpersonal sensitivity is essential. Yet the COVID generation of American students have lived through remote learning during the pandemic, and they now account for increased school absences, which in turn deprives students of developing socialization skills. Simultaneously, the warming climate has resulted in urgent impacts in the global south, while also influencing where Americans live here in the presence of more frequent and more consequential droughts, fires, and floods. So what do? We teach, we engage, we act with perseverance and collaboration, and we succeed. The original Civics Research and Action Project, or OCRA, is a spectacular example of experiential learning from 9th through 12th grades at Mamaroneck High School under the direction of Mamaroneck High School AP government teacher, Joe Liberti, who is here today. Wave hi, Joe. We love you, Joe. Joe's students research a local topic of input and personal interest, communicate with stakeholders and mentors, and develop sustainable solutions. Max Suckman and Emma Freeman are juniors in the Okra program, and both reached out to the League of Women Voters to work with us. League member Louise Perez connected Max and Emma with the County League, where they participate as youth members, engaging with other young county residents and registering them to vote. With us today is Caitlin Solis, a junior in the Okra program. Wave hi. Caitlin, with her partner, seeks to spark interest in local history. They are currently working with local organizations to design an interactive QR code-directed walking trail of the significant people and places of Mamaroneck's past. They expect their website to be live by the summer and plan to install the QR codes throughout the town's historical sites shortly thereafter. The Local History Project has included collaboration with local artist Judith Weber and former residents Ned Benton and League member Judith Silverstein, also here with us today. They are among the community members in REALM, Recognizing Enslaved Africans of Larchmont Mamaroneck, which is a group of local residents who became aware of our community's foundational ties to institutional slavery and have worked with the support of the Mamaroneck Town Board to install, in the future, On the hill in front of the Mamaroneck Town Center, a memorial titled Unearthed, a remembrance that will honor the history, humanity, and contribution of the more than 200 Africans who were enslaved here from 1661 to 1817, more than any other Sound Shore town, and whose involuntary labor helped to build our town. The memorial will be included on the historical walking trail designed by Caitlin and her Oprah partner. And information about the memorial and the history it commemorates is on the side table, and I believe it also may be on your tables. After lunch, our guest speakers will illustrate inspiring ways to prepare and empower our children more broadly and in greater numbers. Before we break for lunch, which is something that I wrote before lunch, but before I break, let's look back. I like to do this every year at the people and events 100 years ago. I think you will find it very sobering to see what was going on. In 1924, the world population was 4.38 billion, and as of April 12, 2024, the world population topped 8.1 billion. On the domestic cultural front, the Happy Birthday to You song was published by Clayton Sonny. What did we do before then? The first crossword puzzle was published by Simon & Schuster. The ice cream cone rolling machine was patented. Robert Frost was awarded the Pulitzer Prize. America had its first Macy's Day Parade. George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue debuted in New York, and 4 planes left Seattle on April 6th, the first successful around-the-world flight. In world politics, Vladimir Lenin, Russia's first premier of the Soviet Union, died on January 21, and within 1 week, St. Petersburg was renamed Leningrad, and it remained so until 1991. Joseph Stalin succeeded Lenin as the leader in the Communist Party, and meanwhile, in April 1924, Italy's fascists received 65% of the vote of parliament, and Bertino Mussolini was in power under the Fascist Party. On May 30, Italian socialist leader Giacomo Matteotti spoke out against fascism, and within days, he was kidnapped and murdered in Rome. Adolf Hitler spent 8 months of a 5-year jail sentence for a failed Nazi Party coup d'état known as the Beer Hall Putsch, during which incarceration he wrote Mein Kampf. Canada granted non-Indigenous women the right to vote, but excluded First Nations women from that right. In the United States, the first political convention was broadcast on radio. J. Edgar Hoover was appointed head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. President Coolidge signed into law the Indian Citizen Act, granting citizenship to all Native Americans born within the territorial limits of the United States, and he also signed into law the Immigration Act of 1924, limiting the number of immigrants through a national origins quota. Rudolf Steiner delivered his agricultural course, which marked the beginning of the organic agriculture movement. Famous boats: Earl Scruggs, Gloria Vanderbilt, Marlon Brando, George H.W. Bush, James Baldwin, Carroll O'Connor, Buddy Hackett, Lauren Bacall, Truman Capote, Jimmy Carter, William Rehnquist, Shirley Chisholm, Alan Sherman, Ed Koch. Famous deaths: Woodrow Wilson, American architect Louis Sullivan, Franz Kafka, and American labor leader Samuel Gompers. I'll be back in a few minutes. Enjoy your lunch. I want to welcome County Executive George Latimer. Yeah. Who wants to be a millionaire? Let's go for it. All right, Caitlin Solis. Drum roll, please. The number is 408169.
We got a winner.
Name, please.
David Heiser.
Oh my goodness.
No, not goodness. I assure you it was not goodness.
Well, congratulations. Today's speakers exemplify the type of accomplished, authentic people we teach our children to emulate. I met Harriet Shugarman in 2012 when the State League Environmental Committee, which I chair, was collaborating with numerous NGOs statewide to educate ourselves and ultimately advocate for a ban on high-volume hydraulic fracturing, what we call fracking, in New York. And the bonds forged from the shared long-term commitment endure. Harriet Shugarman is one of the leading global voices in the parent climate movement. She is the author of How to Talk to Your Kids About Climate Change, Turning Angst into Action. It's a thoughtful guide to educators, parents, grandparents, and all of us on a critical topic of our time. Harriet is the founder and executive director of Climate Mama, an online community with members in over 100 countries and all 50 states. Harriet worked for 13 years with the International Monetary Fund, including 10 years as an IMF representative at the United Nations. Harriet is a mentor and leader with Climate Reality and the co-chair of the Advisory Council for Our Kids Climate, an international network of parent organizations, an advisor to Globe from Home, and a professor at Ramapo College. Harriet has devoted considerable time this year advocating for the passage of legislation that would require all New York public school students to receive climate education across a range of academic topics so that New York can continue to fulfill the state's statutory climate leadership commitment. Consistent with the League of Women Voters' commitment to address the climate emergency, I drafted and had approved by our state league's Issues and Advocacy Committee a memorandum of support for the climate education legislation. It will be available on the league's website and filed with the legislature once the budget is passed. Harriet will speak today about empowering students through education and climate change. While I was teaching graduate courses in the Education for Sustainability program at Manhattanville College, Harriet introduced me to her inspiring colleague, UK-based Rajam, who has been evolutionizing teaching with live-streamed, globally connected education, north to south. Rajam is a UK-based business leader whose worldview has been shaped by 2 decades in international travel, which gave him the opportunity to spend time with cultures and communities around the planet. And Raj has applied his passion about playing a part in building an equitable, circular, and sustainable world to the creation of Globe from Home. Through Globe from Home, Raj and his team have introduced the world's first climate and sustainability awareness education programs and green skills courses that take learners to different countries to witness the impact of climate change and learn about solutions and sustainability. Rooted in social and emotional learning that foster empathy for people and the planet, these programs aim to prepare a new generation of empathetic, planet-aware citizens who can work cohesively toward a sustainable future. I, too, am a member of Globe from Home's team. Raj is not feeling well and not here today. And while I can't replicate Raj's contagious energy, we will air travel shortly to Nairobi on a trip that Raj prepared, which itself will speak volumes about the important generational impact Globe from Home promises to make. The League's education issues specialist, Marion Vaught, introduced me to Michael Rebell, whose commitment to equity in our children's education and the role of civics is second to none. Michael Rebell is the executive director of the Center for Educational Equity and a professor at Columbia Law School and at Teachers College. The center seeks to promote equity and excellence in education and to overcome the gap in educational access and achievement between advantaged and disadvantaged students throughout the United States. Mr. Rebell is also co-convener of the Democracy Ready New York Coalition. Michael Rebell has been lead counsel in cases decided by New York's highest court, declaring the constitutional rights of children to sound basic education. In addition, Mr. Rebell has authored books and articles on issues and law and education, and his most recent book is titled Flunking Democracy: Schools, Courts, and civic participation. And today, Michael Rebell will discuss the role of experiential civics in education. Here's what Michael's book looks like. The name Barbara Bartoletti is synonymous with legislative guru. Barbara Bartoletti is the former legislative director for the League of Women Voters of New York State. And during her decades-long tenure, Barbara was a tireless advocate and full-time volunteer who served as a voice for citizens and a force for change. A few of Barbara's accomplishments and challenges spanning her 40-plus year career include passage of the Clean Indoor Air Act and the continued push for campaign finance reform and government transparency. And Barbara will share her observations on the topics raised today and how our legislature might support effective change. Harriet, can you give me a hand? We're going to begin with a trip to Nairobi, compliments of Globe from Home.
This is the pre-departure announcement for all passengers from the Women's Wolfpack, Bedford 2030, and all other guests who are flying on Globe from Home's virtual flight. Your flight is now ready to board, and we request that you proceed towards check-in. Please have your boarding passes ready and have a safe and comfortable journey. Today you will be taken on a journey unlike any you've been on before. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the trip. Our first destination is Nairobi in Kenya, where you will then travel onwards to Kibera and meet your tour guide.
Jambo everyone, my name is Luke and it's a pleasure to welcome you all. I am standing in front of Kibera slum, the largest slum in Africa and one of the largest slums all over the world. This is a home to more than 250,000 people living here in a very small area, an area of 3 square kilometers, an area smaller than the size of Central Park in New York City. These people are faced with extreme poverty such that they are not able to access basic essential services like electricity, running water, and even proper medical care. I grew up here and I faced similar challenges that comes with it. Let's have a walk around Kibera slum and see more. I just want to show you more of daily life in Kibera. You can see kids coming from school. So I'll divert a bit and we're gonna see one of the unpaved roads here. In these streets, or rather this path or this unpaved way, you'll find that there are some business around side by side. The houses here are characterized by materials which are made of mud, wood, and iron sheet on the roof. You can see kids coming from school. Mambo, motoka shule. Unaitwa nani? Michael. Nice. So she's from school. Okay. We're gonna get inside one of the houses and see if you are welcome in order to explore more of what is inside. This is just one of the houses. It's iron sheet like that. Let's get inside and see more.
Welcome to my house.
Yes. What's your name?
My name is Beatrice from Kibera.
Yeah. Thank you, Beatrice.
This is my house. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. So, guys, we've just been welcomed. So, Beatrice, we have our guest here who would like to see your beautiful home today.
Okay.
Yeah. So, we'd like us to maybe just show us around, like, where do you cook? What's the kitchen area? Where do you sit with your family? And where is your bedroom?
Kitchen portal.
And
And the bedroom here.
Okay. That's the bedroom. Okay, so this clean water area, that's where she stores her water. So ideally, guys, houses in Kibera are not very big. They are 12 by 12 feet in size, and you'll find that in a family there are about 4 to 6 kids, or rather sometimes they can be 8 kids. So where do your kids sleep?
They sleep in the floor.
Okay, so they sleep down on the floor. They put a mattress there. So guys, this is just a common house. It's 12 by 12. The kids sleep on the floor. Then the mom and dad sleep on the bed. You can imagine when it's really hot, how the temperature can be inside such a house, because it's closely packed and very small, and sometimes the roof, the iron sheet roof, can be very hot during the summer. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah. So guys, let's have a walk here. You can see people doing business. We have a toilet here. It's being utilized by the community here. So you'll find that around 50 houses use one common toilet in this area. Mambo, unatembea? Sawa. So initially, there was no let's say piped water inside the slum, and people used to go far until Nairobi Dam just to collect water. There was no piped water. And in recent years, the municipal council has had the effort of just channeling piped water so that people here can get water. And the challenge is where it passes. Some terrains which are not very clean. This is one of the water fetching points here. Yeah, this is drinking water, where it comes from. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. So you can imagine the terrain where it passes. Hello, Mambo. Unatoka shule? Aya, unaenda kwa duka? So, despite the efforts of municipal council to bring channel water inside the slum, the water still passes and the mixes with the wet sludge and everything. So you can imagine the contamination, the diseases that can be spread around here. I'm going to show you one of the many dumping sites here in Kibera. Let me come closer so that you can have a view of it. So here in Kibera, we do not have a proper waste management system in place in order to govern such dumping sites. So I'm going to show you the scale of it, how it is. Garbage thrown here are from household items to human waste and everything from the households. So imagine the pollution, and it's an open dumping site, guys. You can imagine. What I just showed you is a brief picture of life and hardship in this slum. Life is hard as it is, especially for the kids in the slum. Now you can imagine the impact of climate change on our community, or the community in Kibera. Due to global warming, sometimes it rains without warning, and eventually there is some floods. And when the floods mix with sludge and filth around the community due to runoff, people end up contracting diseases and eventually can lead to deaths around this slum. Global warming has impacts around the world, but some, like we in Kibera, feel it more than others. As my friend Kevin says always, we share the same planet, but the planet that I live on is different from the one that you live in. Thank you all, and let's meet again. Welcome back, everyone. We are at Globe from Home's first climate school in Africa. These children have never been outside the slums. Through Globe from Home's climate school, they will travel around the planet, interact with the people in different countries, and know about the world. They will learn about climate change, the reasons behind it, and about solutions. Next time when the rain falls and we have flooding, they will know what to do in the local context.
I'm Mrs. Sagala, the founder of Fairview Children's Center. I'm grateful to have this climate school, and I think teaching these small children at their tender age about climate, they'll know as they grow up how to deal with the climate change and even help the neighbor schools and neighbors in the community to know much about climate. Thank you.
So guys, this is the happy ending to this story. The first climate school in Africa.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Michael Rebell, and thank you to Beth for that very warm introduction. I'm going to speak a little bit about not climate change or environmental education, but about civics education, which I think encompasses environmental issues, political issues, the whole range of things that a knowledgeable young person should know about. So maybe that's a way of segueing to what we're talking about civics as well as we're talking about environmental education. I want to begin by just quoting a section from a recent court decision. This is from the case of Cook v. Raimondo, a federal case that's been litigated in the federal courts in Rhode Island. And Federal District Judge William Smith stated in that decision that, quote, "Our country's survival and the student's ability to reap the benefits of living in a country with robust freedoms and rights, a strong economy, and a moral center protected by the rule of law is something that citizens must cherish, protect, and constantly work for. We would do well to pay attention to their plea." This was a plea of 14 student plaintiffs for an adequate civic education. And Judge Smith also quoted a noted political scientist statement that the first defense against the degeneration of democracy is, quote, "a thorough understanding of the institutions and practices of the democratic order and the government it licenses." So this judge was putting into legal language, which I understand, and that's why I quote it to you, but I think you all understand it too. And we know from our daily experience in these tumultuous times in which we live how important our civic institutions are. And I think we all know that if our young people don't understand how these institutions work, are not committed to them, and are not involved and engaged in civic engagement, we have a very perilous future ahead of us. So let me talk more specifically about the problem of civic education in our schools today. Some of you may be familiar with the National Assessment in Education, which is a national examination that's given in various subjects. Last time it was given, in 2022, only 23% of the students in the United States reached a proficiency level in civics. 23%. So that means 77% of our students are below where they should be in understanding civic institutions. There's an actually even worse statistic that I want to bring to your attention, and this is from something called the World Values Survey that was done a few years ago, and this is a worldwide survey, but within the United States, for those polled, they poll people of all ages on their attitudes toward democracy. So of the generation that was born before World War II, 72% of the people said it's essential to live in a democracy. Then when they polled those born after 1980, the millennial generation and younger, only 30% said that it's essential to live in a democracy. This is a frightening statistic, and it tells us that our schools are not doing much of a job. 23% proficiency, 30% really cherishing and valuing democracy. What's the problem here? Well, it's a deep-rooted problem, and it goes back at least half a century. I think you can trace it really to the era of the Vietnam War challenges, when trust in our institutions began to be challenged, and we've reached the stage where none of our major political institutions, including the Supreme Court, are considered valuable and trustworthy by anywhere near even half of our people. We've had things going on within the education system itself for the past 30 years. The real emphasis has been on basic skills, English, math. Those are the things that get tested. As many of you know, what gets tested is what gets taught. So there's been a real de-emphasis on social studies and civics, a lot of studies showing the diminished number of hours that are devoted to those subjects, and it results in very few people knowing much about American history, knowing much about our civic institutions. I think there's also a reality that it's much more difficult to teach civics in the 21st century than it was in the 20th century. And that has to do with the increased diversity of our society, the increased polarization. It's a challenge for a social studies teacher or humanities teacher to be able to deal with articulating values and teaching people how to have conversations on controversial issues with people who come from different backgrounds, who you don't agree with. But that's what has to be conveyed if we're going to survive and thrive in the environment in which we're all now living, and which we're going to be living more and more in the near future. So that's a challenging role for the education system itself. The nature of what civics is and what needs to be taught has changed over the years, and our professional development, our training of teachers has not kept up with that, not at all. And then on top of all of that, we have the technological revolution that we all exist in. Social media has its great advantages, it's got its disadvantages, but the one thing that's clear is if students are going to relate positively to social media, schools are going to have to teach them media literacy. That means how to distinguish accurate from inaccurate information, how to check your sources and know where facts are coming from. These are vital skills, and these are things that the schools need to teach, and by and large, they're not doing it. So I want to refer back to that federal case. The reason I cited the judge in that case, that was a litigation that I was counsel for the plaintiff students in, and we were hoping that we would get the court's attention on this major problem of the deficiency of civic education in Rhode Island. That was a test case that we brought there for various reasons, but we hoped that we would get the federal courts and ideally the U.S. Supreme Court to focus on this issue and make it clear that this should be a national priority. It should not be the low priority that it's been for the last 50 years in this country. And this judge understood it. You could get that flavor. He wrote a 50-page decision, a really moving, striking decision that was saying he thanked the students for bringing this case, for bringing to our attention the deficiencies in the teaching of civics in our schools these days. But ultimately, he said he couldn't rule in their favor to dramatically change the system in Rhode Island because precedents from the Supreme Court stood against it. So he wished us well, and I've since met with him He's a great guy. No, his 50-page thing is well worth reading, and many social studies people have picked it up. Anyway, there's a long legal story here. We were hoping to get to the Supreme Court. The composition of the Supreme Court has changed over the years. I was litigating this. We ultimately decided that this was not the best time to bring a controversial issue like this to the Supreme Court. But we're working on Plan B. What's our Plan B? To bring this case to various state courts, which may be much more open to it. Now, why would state courts be more open to a litigation asking for the courts to get involved in promoting civic education? Well, the fact is that there's language in the majority of state constitutions that explicitly state that students have a right to an adequate education, and they define adequate education in terms of preparing them for capable citizenship. Now, usually they also add preparing them for the workplace. But the first purpose, the original purpose of education in the United States was to prepare students to be capable citizens. And that's why it got written into all these state constitutions. So we were trying to establish a right under the federal constitution, which doesn't exist, but it already exists in at least 32 states that I've been able to identify so far. Let me give you an example of one state constitution that does explicitly give every child a strong right to an adequate civic education. And I'm going to quote the Constitution of the state of New York. Article 11 of New York State's Constitution, as it's been interpreted by our highest court, the Court of Appeals, and Beth mentioned the CFE case that I litigated a number of years ago. The highest court in New York held that under Article 11, every child in the state of New York has a constitutional right to the opportunity for a sound basic education. And then they defined what is a sound basic education that kids have a right to. Well, it's the skills they need to function productively as civic participants capable of voting and serving on a jury. That is the essence of education according to our state's highest court, and every child in this state has a constitutional right to the opportunity for a sound basic education that will prepare them to be capable citizens. That is powerful. That is important. And we've got 31 other states that have language, maybe not quite as strong, but get to the same purpose. The problem is in most of those states, that exists in theory. It exists maybe in a classroom where people talk about it. It hasn't been implemented. So what we're currently doing, we're preparing some cases in some model states to get these courts to implement what's an already existing right. And we're working now in Kentucky and starting a new thing in Minnesota to do that. Well, you may say, I'm living here in New York, I'm talking to you in New York State. Why didn't we bring the case in New York State? Well, even though I'm far from pleased with the state of civic education in New York, what I do want to say is our state education department has understood what this constitutional right is, and they have been working to implement it in New York. So we're going to go down to Kentucky because their court had really strong language, the same, maybe even stronger than New York, but they haven't enforced it for the last 30 years. In New York, the state education department has taken it very seriously. So when Betty Rosa, who's now the Commissioner of Education, she was originally the chancellor, chairman of the board, you might say. When she took over, one of the first things they did is say, well, we've got to define what civic education is. What is civic readiness? What is it? How do we define that a child's ready to be a capable citizen? What do we want our schools to do? So the regents appointed a task force to look into this question of what is civic readiness and how can our state do a better job of inspiring the courts to follow that. And I was asked to chair that task force a few years ago. And I want to tell you 3 things that we accomplished with that task force, which are now the official policy of the state of New York. First, we defined what civic readiness is. And it's been defined in very strong terms. So New York State now, as official Regents policy, has a definition of civic education that is quite robust. It means knowledge of American institutions, American history, civic knowledge, which is important, very important. But it doesn't stop there. The second thing it talks about is civic skills. Civic skills means things like basic verbal ability to articulate, to understand, to be able to communicate, to understand, be literate, to be able to read political documents, to know what's going on. But it also specifically means media literacy skills. So that is part of the definition of civic skills that all kids should learn. The third thing that is part of this definition is what we call civic engagement. And that means experiential involvement in learning how to be a good citizen. That means certain extracurricular activities at schools. It means certain involvement in community activities. And the fourth is civic dispositions, which means attitudes, understanding democratic values, the rule of law, things like that. So that's what every child in the state of New York is entitled to at this point. Now, how does this policy get put into effect? Well, the second thing that our task force recommended and the Regents adopted was a Civic SEAL program. I don't know if many of you are aware of this. You should be, because it's a very excellent concept. A Civic SEAL program is the idea that students who do outstanding work in the area of civics get a seal on their diploma, a badge of honor, however you want to term it, which is very helpful for college admissions, for jobs, et cetera, saying this person has proved to be outstanding in civic accomplishment. And this was started out as a pilot program 3 years ago. There were 120 schools around the state that signed up for it. The way it works, the state has identified certain activities for which students get points, taking so many courses, getting involved in active community engagement, various activities, and you get a certain number of points for each. If you get 12 points, you get a diploma seal. There were originally 120 schools that volunteered for this pilot. The second year, it was open to schools throughout the state, and 300 schools signed up. This year, we had 500. Now, I don't know how many, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly how many schools in Westchester County have signed up. I know we've got about 125 in New York City. But if the districts that you are coming from, your children, your grandchildren attend, are not state seal schools, you ought to look into it for next year because it's a real opportunity for kids. And one of the reasons it's such an opportunity, I want to emphasize the experiential aspect of this. The third thing we did with this task force was emphasize the importance of capstone projects. So the state education department has put out a set of rubrics, guidelines, and all for the SEAL districts to use in motivating students to undertake capstone projects. What is a capstone project? Well, it's a capstone of their educational experience, and it culminates their educational experience by requiring them to, first of all, use their civic knowledge to analyze a problem in an area that's important to them. Many students take environmental problems, they take educational problems, whatever it is. Sometimes it's a problem within the school that they want to see corrected. Sometimes it's a problem in the immediate community. Sometimes it can be a problem in the state. And the idea is they research it, they look at what the issues are, the pros and cons, and then when they identify a problem, they come up with a potential solution. And then they're supposed to work on the solution. Now, if it's a political type problem, it may mean petitioning the legislature, the local city council, working on it. And sometimes they'll succeed in getting change. Sometimes they don't succeed. But what they get out of it, win or lose, That's the nature of democracy. That's the nature of civic engagement. You do your best. You try to influence policy, and you learn how to do it. And sometimes you learn by succeeding. Sometimes you learn by not succeeding. But that effort is the essence of it. So students who complete a capstone project get 6 points toward the seal. That's half the points they need. The seal project very much encourage this. Now, the state has not yet done a thorough job of evaluating exactly what's been going on in the 500 schools. Beth mentioned we have an organization called Democracy Ready New York that we're very proud of. Democracy Ready is a coalition, a statewide coalition in New York. The members consist of the leading major education groups, the State Teachers Union Association, the school boards, the superintendents, et cetera. But it's also the leading civic organizations. And I'm very pleased to note that the League of Women Voters is among our very active members. We've got the Citizens Union, we have Generation Citizen, a lot of the civic groups. And historically, the education groups and the civic groups have not gotten together to talk about and do things on civic education. But through this coalition, we do. And we're pushing for a bill on media literacy in the legislature. We're pushing to improve the SEAL project, to come up with assessment standards, probably performance assessment standards that will improve the quality of these operations. And we're trying to spread the word that all schools in the state should do that. It's not required, and it does take resources. That's one of the problems from an equity point of view we're very concerned about, and we're trying to work with the state to make sure that all kinds of schools, whether they're in affluent areas, whether they're in low-income areas, are able to offer this opportunity to their students. And I will say, in the initial group of schools that have entered into this program, we've been pleased that they're not all affluent schools. A lot of schools in low-income areas have seen this as a priority. And one way or another, they find a way to get the support that their kids need. But it's harder for them, obviously, and I think the state could do a lot more to make that much more equitable. So the message I want to leave you with is New York's doing a better job than most other states on civic education, but there's a long way to go. And one way that all of us in the room can help on this is spread the word about the SEAL project and how important it is to back that and other initiatives that are being undertaken to improve civic education. Thank you.
Great. Well, I want to take everything that Michael shared with us and say we take the wicked problem of the climate crisis and make that as the capstone project that all the kids have to work on when they earn their civics belt. So we have SEAL. So how do we bring these things together? We need exemplars. We don't need to create new curriculum. We need an educated populace, which comes from our young people learning that they can be part of a participatory democracy. And they no longer feel that, right? They've removed themselves from that space. We need to go to Kenya. I actually traveled with Luke because in a regular place, the Globe from Home program takes you with him when he's there live on his iPhone. It's not a recording, and it was raining and pouring. And to have kids have those experiences and to then want to be part of the solutions is what we really need to be able to provide. And so what I want to do is just take a few minutes today and sort of bring this story, the importance of what Michael has shared with us. And it isn't easy, right? Of course, we should all be educated to understand our civic responsibility, our role in life. You know, I recently moved back to New York from New Jersey. I'm Canadian as well, but I had to change my driver's license. And you know what? When you do that, you're automatically in a jury. I was called for jury duty right away. And it should be more than that, not just getting your driver's license. But if you do get it, as you become of age, you should actually understand what those responsibilities are all about. So, how can we, combine those things, civic education and climate education? And what, we heard how, that New York State is the one state that actually provides or has on its books that we should be able to, our children should learn about civics education. Do you know the one state in the United States that requires or that our children K through 12 cross-curricular learn about climate change? Anyone? California? New Jersey. And the other state on the other side of us in the tri-state area has legislated that climate change be taught in the science realm, K through 12, and they just added in social studies. Because you know what? In social studies, you should learn about young people's protests around climate, about what is being done. It's not just in science, right? Climate change is a social problem that is impacting our children now. It's a science, it's a health problem, it's a voting problem. It's a threat multiplier. It makes everything worse. And it is something that our kids and us, right? It has changed our lives forever. We are living the climate crisis now, but our kids are learning about it from the internet. They don't have media literacy. They aren't understanding. They're picking and choosing. They're learning about it from their friends. We saw here, I live in New York City, how our skies turned orange last summer. We took a lot of young people on this climate bill, which I'm going to share with you, to Albany over the past 3 and 4 months to talk to their legislators. And they told, and it was amazing actually to watch a high schooler and a middle schooler talk to their elected official and to be heard and to be listened to. And so that, as part of civics education, to be able to understand that those people are representing your family and your community, I really saw like lights go on in these young people's eyes that have never done that, because they don't feel that the State House is their house. That's our house, right? We have a right to be there. We should be there. We should be advocating on these issues, and they feel so removed from it. So to have that opportunity to bring them to talk about an issue that they feel this huge weight on their shoulders. They're responsible for fixing the climate crisis. And we do that in many ways. I hear many of my colleagues, well, you're going to grow up in this world that is forever changed by the climate crisis. You fix it. Well, like so many things, same with our broken democracy, so unfair, right? It's our job. And I know I'm talking to a room of doers and people that have made and make change. And I've come in the past to some of these luncheons that Beth has worked so tirelessly on pulling together people and issues, because the League of Women Voters is about issues and not just educating people on issues, which are critically important, right? We need to understand what's at stake, but also actually seeing there's a role for all of us to play. And many of you in this room are playing that role and helping change laws and move things forward so that all of us have a better opportunity and hope. But many young people, as it relates to the climate crisis, actually feel overwhelmed and stymied of this wicked problem, right? It's how do we move forward? What is my life going to be like? I don't want to have children. I mean, I hear all these things. I've spent my career working on climate communications and policy, and it's all of our issue and problem. And it's also an incredible opportunity, right? We're alive at a moment where what scientists tell us what we do right now actually matters in a way that's never mattered before. I mean, the planet will be here. She will go through all kinds of changes and already has. But as humans and as a species on this planet that is impacting every other species, what we do now matters. So our children need to learn the realities. They need to learn the facts. They need to learn it from an partial educator. They need to be getting this at school, and they aren't. And in New York State, they aren't. And yet we heard from Beth earlier that, in fact, it's part of our climate law. We're very proud in New York State, and we should be, that we've set very stringent goals on what we're going to do to reduce emissions, to move forward, to address the climate crisis, to build resiliency so that, we're looking out at this beautiful water here. How are we going to protect ourselves from rising sea levels, from storms that come in? We need an educated populace so that our children feel inspired and hopeful to be part of those solutions, because we aren't going to stop the climate crisis, but we can make it much less worse than it would be. And we need a educated workforce that, whether you're a carpenter, an electrician, an architect, an educator, a physician, all of those careers will be and are impacted by the climate crisis. So we need to be able to begin that education at a very young age. And as we all know, we're, maybe we have a few high schoolers in the room, but otherwise we're all of a certain age, right? Time goes fast and it only speeds up more. And so beginning now in kindergarten to educate young people, and not in a scary way, in a hopeful, helpful way, in every subject area, to be equipped to come out when you graduate high school, and whether you go to college or you go directly into a career or a trade, that you're going to be part of the solution. And yet we're not talking about it. Our teachers aren't talking about it. The parents, we're not talking about it, because why? So this is a study that came out from New Jersey and Edweek, and it's similar to some of the issues that our teachers face when it comes to teaching civics education, right? As we become this more polarized society, teachers aren't prepared. They don't have the resources. They don't feel that they're equipped to be able to do this. So they need the professional development. They need to have, to be able to pull out examples, to be able to easily provide. We don't want to add more onto their shoulders. We want to equip them to be able to answer the questions that come from and through their students. So in New York State, in the legislature now, we have a bill that was written by an intergenerational team. We had high school students that helped draft the bill. There were 8 climate ed bills that are floating around, and this one seemed like the one that could be expanded in a way to really encompass a lot of things in it. And it's stuck. So we need your help. So again, here's something as we leave that we can work on, both on moving the civics education, that SEAL advanced and beyond. And if not in this legislative session, because we're coming to the end of it, how can we work together? Some of you are educators, county leaders, town leaders, to bring this, and not in a way that impacts all of our students around the state, not just in those schools where there's an amazing teacher that wants to take this on. I opened a youth symposium at Mercy College, near here, just 2 days ago. And there were examples of young people's climate projects from around the state. They've been working on them through an organization called SELF, which is also up here in Westchester, the Children's Environmental Literacy Foundation. And it was exciting to see what these young people have been working on the last year. But I met many of their educators, and they're passionate, and they told me they're not getting support through their school. Most of them are not. It's because they're passionate about this, and they want to help their young people be passionate about this. It should be an opportunity for kids, if they live in the North Country, if they live in the East Village, if they live here, that you can learn about the realities that we're facing as a community and what we can do about it. So these are some of the kids that we took. And again, it was amazing and incredible. My colleague Susan is here. I don't know if you're in one of those pictures, Susan, but in bringing these young people forward, people are worried about the climate crisis. Parents, students, educators, we are all concerned about it, right? We just need to go outside on those smoky days, and there'll only be more every year, right? It's going to continue. We can't, this is part of our lives. We are forever climate changed, but we need to be able to talk to our neighbors. This should bring us together instead of apart, right? It should be an issue that it's become politicized. Why is that? It affects you whether you're a Republican, an independent, a Democrat. This is from the Yale Climate Communications, who are trusted messengers, across the board. Well, it's family and friends. It's people in this room. And it is teachers as well, if they're well equipped to do that. So it's all of our jobs to talk about climate education. It's something that we need to take on from an intergenerational perspective. And I'm going to I want to quickly share this one example with you, and I want to move through so Barbara can come up, and then we can have some time for questions as well. But this is my friend Paula in the upper right-hand corner. She was a New York City kindergarten teacher, public school educator for 40 years. She brought into her class some grandparents of one of her students who were talking about what was happening on Long Island with poison going into the parks, pesticides being used in public parks. And she found out that in New York City, they were using Roundup, pesticides, glyphosate on school playgrounds and in public parks. And her and kindergartners understood that was wrong. That was not okay. They brought in their local city councilman to come and talk to the students. And he said, "You're right, it's wrong. We are going to pass a bill in New York City so that doesn't happen anymore." Well, you know what? It took 7 years, but do I have a picture of it? It happened. And that young man, I don't know if you can see speaking in that there, he was in that first kindergarten class. And he came when the bill was introduced. So kids, it happens. Sometimes it takes longer than we want, but we can do it together. These are just some photos from around the world of young people wanting action on the climate crisis, moving things forward. We can change things, but we can't put it on young people's shoulders alone. We need them to see there are all of us working on this, and we recognize the importance of this problem, and it becomes a solution and an opportunity and part of our civic responsibility to be able to do these things. So I am going to hand the mic over to Barbara, who is going to pull it all together in different ways for us. Thank you all.
Hello, everyone. This is kind of like a little bit of going home for me, because I was here probably 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. There were a lot of different issues at the time, and I was legislative director for the State League at the time. I am now retired and have become actually a grandparent advocate. I have 10 grandchildren, but I have 3 that are of voting age, an 18-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 23-year-old. The 23-year-old is now a history teacher, as 8th grade history teacher. And I have begun to really be fixated, as perhaps Michael would say, and as Harriet would say, I have become fixated on intergenerational teaching of my grandchildren and the advocacy that we in the League are so good at to make sure that there is curriculum in the high schools, in the elementary schools, right down to age-appropriate kindergartners, and how important, and let's just take a moment, just look at what's going on in our world, not just in our state, but in our world. And I have these young, 9 of my grandchildren are boys. 3 of them, as I said, are of voting and of military age. And I worry desperately that if we don't learn the history of what has gone on in our world previously, and I think that we had a conversation about what we were talking at the table about, and I guess it was Beth that my friend Beth and I have known one another almost as long as Marion Bott and I have known one another. And we were talking about what was going on 100 years from now. Well, you could change the date and you could tell that some of the things that were going on 100 years ago are manifesting themselves today. And if we don't teach our young people, and the League is so good at this, if we don't advocate for teaching our young people, as Michael is doing, civic education, so that they are not, it just boggles my mind when someone says they get their news from TikTok or social media mimes. I'm not even sure what that is, actually. But they need to know what it's like to be a citizen in a democracy. And I was terribly disturbed by what Michael had to say as far as some of the percentages of what our children know today. And whenever I go and visit my teenage grandchildren, some in high school, some are in college, that's one of the first questions I ask is, what are they teaching you? What do you learn about what went on in the world 2 days ago? Or what's going on in Washington? What's going on at your state house? I embarrassed my son-in-law, who is an attorney. I embarrassed him terribly because I said to my 18-year-old, Scott, how many people sit on the Supreme Court? Well, Scott knew as an 18-year-old, my lawyer son-in-law, I don't know. I went, really? You went to law school? He goes, yeah, but I don't practice that kind of law. I went, I'm sorry, you ought to at least know how many people sit on the Supreme Court. The 18-year-old knew because he and I had a texting thing about what was going on at the Supreme Court. And I know I bug him. And I bugged legislators for 30 years. So I guess what I want to get across to League members is the League has, take a look at our issues portfolio. You can be an avid believer in the education portfolio. As Marion Bott, I've learned more from Marion Bott over the last 15 years than I learned in the first 55 years of my life. We've been friends for a long time. I've learned a great deal. Beth, I've learned, and actually I must say, I had a dear friend, Millie Whalen, from the North Country, who sat on our League board, state board, who sat on Mr. Cuomo's transition team dealing with the environment. She was an avid environmentalist. And I have, for myself, the years I was as League legislative director, the things I was most proud of, one of the things I was most proud of was the fact that we passed the Indoor Air Act. Back in 1995, do all of you are of a certain age like me, you remember going to a restaurant and having to worry about secondhand smoke and coming home and wanting to wash your hair and dry clean your clothes? We changed that. The League changed that. And now, nobody would ever consider going inside a library, going to a playground or to a high school football game or in a bar or a restaurant. They wouldn't let you in. It took us 10 years, but we passed that. We changed society, and New York was the first one to pass it. And now it's everywhere in the United States and most of Europe. I worked in Russia for a bit. And in Russia, the 11-year-olds were smoking. And I thought to myself, oh my God, these kids won't live to be 40. But we changed that in the United States, in New York State first and then throughout the United States. The League can change the world when it sets its mind to do it because we are all advocates. And you know what's special about the League? We know how to do it. We know how to pick up the phone. Now, I know everybody says, oh, you got to do social media now, and I'm not good at technology. But I do know how to email my legislators, and they wish I didn't. Because now in retirement, I know the process, and I know how to get it done. And there are many issues that I care desperately about. And so I let my elected officials know. And I guess that's what I want to say to all of you today is your voice does need to be heard, probably more now than even 25, 30, 40 years ago. Things are in a very, very precarious state. Not so much in our state, although I'm being the advocate that I am, and I sit on the state board's task force on the New York State Equal Rights Amendment. So I'm obviously always advocating for that here in New York State. That if you go out of New York State, reproductive rights is terribly in jeopardy all over this country. And we need to let legislators know that that's something we care about. We care about looking out at that beautiful water, the fact that we have fresh air and we don't have to worry about the orange plume that comes down from Canada because the wildfires, or the fact that half of just an area in the southeast, not of this country, but in the southeast of our globe, they've had floods that they never saw before. We have volcanoes going off in Iceland. We have all kinds of wildfires last year or 2 years ago in Hawaii. The climate is changing, and every single legislator should hear from us on a monthly basis. And I'm talking about at the national level now. Know who your elected officials are. Know who your congressman is. Know who your state senators, your state house, your U.S. senators are. Chuck Schumer. Gee, we have the majority leader of the U.S. Senate in our state. He gets a lot of messages from me because that's the only thing I know how to do, actually. I know how to send Chuck Schumer and Senator Gillibrand. She gets a few messages too. But whatever issue you are most impassioned about, and in the league, there are lots of them to choose from, but don't just choose one. Become a full-time voice in your local community at the state level. And because of what's going on in the greater world today, we need to be a voice at the national level too. So get to know and get your legislators to know who you are, because there's an old saying in the league when I came into the league 46 years ago and thought I had just met the most intelligent women, and they seemed to know everything. And I wanted to know what they knew. And the league allows for us to know a lot about a lot of different things. So be impassioned about the issues that you care about. Learn about a lot more issues, because the world, your state, is counting on you. And we know how to do it. The first thing I learned when I came into the league was the saying, and I'm sure all of you have heard it at one time or another: democracy is not a spectator sport. And right now, all of us need to get into the game, because without our voice, we aren't going to have these kids who learn how to at least be able to sit on a jury. You're hearing a lot about juries lately. Well, we have to educate our students to sit on a jury, to know that at 18 they must get out and vote, because they're going to live with the consequences. So tell your grandchildren. How many of you have grandchildren that are of voting age? Yeah, I mean, I've got them, and I pester them, and they all know they have to vote. I don't tell them how to vote, but I sure give them enough information so that they make an informed vote. And that's what we're looking for. So pick an issue, pick all of the issues. I mean, education right now in New York State the budget is being done, and education is becoming a real big point right now. Housing, another big issue. The league has a position. We don't advocate for it as much as we perhaps do. And I must say, the league is looked at as a voting rights organization, and we are. But we are so much more. We do the environment. We do healthcare. We do education. We do reproductive choice. I remember when we did social policy with daycare and pay equity on women's issues. There's so much out there in the league. So you have lots to choose from. But whatever it is you choose, get involved, let your voice be heard, and let's make sure that I just finished a book called 2034, and I can tell you at the end of this book, we do not want to see what that book says will happen by 2034. Not good. So get out there and use your voice, and let's have some questions if we have any.
Thank you for sticking around. Do we have any questions? Do we have any announcements?
Yes, with Earth Day.
Do you have any Earth Day?
Yes.
There's a big Earth Day celebration in Larchmont on
The 27th.
right, and this is the lady who's in charge.
So 27th, Constitution Park, 1 to 4.
Constitution Park, April 27th, 1 to 4.
Yes.
Earth Day celebration.
You can hear Elizabeth Colbert on the 24th.
Plant a tree.
We're planting a tree on the 24th.
One more thing, we're going to have a new award called the Environmental Warrior, and our first recipient's going to be Marlene.
And this award going to Marlene Colbert. And Marlene Colbert's daughter, Elizabeth, is going to be at Larchmont Library on
Following day.
the following day, the 28th?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great.
For her new book.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I think that Barbara really summed up what I wanted to say. I've been involved in the League, I don't know, for quite a long time, maybe about 19 or 20 years. And what I found, I think that we really do consider ourselves a voter rights, voter registration. I've been more involved on the policy level, but I think that we hear these sayings and we don't necessarily imbue them with a lot of significance, but it really is true that one person can make a big difference, and obviously collaborating is important. And I found that through the work that I've done in the League, and for me it was largely initially around high volume hydraulic fracturing, and I met people around the state, and being devoted to an issue that I cared deeply about, and working with people who were intelligent and impassioned, created bonds that you can't break. And they give life tremendous meaning. And I think that that is one of the things, as we get older, we're thinking about, well, what have I done in my life? I had a profession, I have a family, I have my friends. Have I left a mark? Do I want to leave a mark? Does that matter? And I think that the League of Women Voters has a tremendous opportunity for people to be able to tap into what matters to you personally. There are so many issues of import, and if you follow that theme, you can make a difference. And so, this is not just hyperbole. I know that's a Joe Biden phrase that I hear a lot, but I think that really we may discount some of these things. You can make a difference, and we here will thrive with your membership. If you're interested in joining the board, if you want to write postcards, if you want to explore an issue, we're available here. For those of you who live in Rybrook, approach people there. For those of you who live in this community, join us here. If you live up county, there's the County League. And it's important also, Equal Rights Amendment, to turn over the ballot and vote yes on the ballot. And if there's any kind of issue that you're interested in, get in touch with me. If you're interested at the state level, I do have communication with the State League because I chair a State League committee. Thank you all for coming here. We're delighted to have you. Please bring material home. We want that table to be empty when you leave. And I guess that's it until next year. Take care.